Hey guys, so about a week ago I got a comment on my video for Washington Prime, basically asking me, is Washington Prime a viable assistant general for any march size? And this question was asked because Washington Prime has a very large march size. That does lend him to have some damage that can be lent to any march at all, since the march size isn't tied to a specific troop type. So what I've done is I've run the numbers on Washington Prime and 5 other generals in every march type to see how he stacks up against other generals that could be put in that situation. And we're also going to take a look at, is it viable to do this? Now, the 6 generals that I selected: Alexander the Great, Washington Prime, Genghis Khan, Prince Rhaegar, Napoleon, the normal Napoleon, and King Arthur. Quick note, Genghis Khan, King Arthur both cannot take the march size book, so keep that in mind as we're looking at these numbers. All of these generals were selected because they have either a high march size overall, or they have stats that can be applied to many different troop types. There are probably other generals that you could put in here, but these are just the ones that I ran to get a general idea of it. If there are some that you think would be better than Washington Prime or any of these guys here, leave a comment below and I might look into them if I get a chance. And without further ado, let's jump into the numbers. Now, originally I ran the numbers for them as the main general as well, but I'm not really going to talk about them in this video for the simple fact that you should definitely be using a general specific to each troop type, with the exception of the general has a specialty for 2 of the 4 troop types, which some do. There's a lot of generals that can do ground and mounted equally well, and ones that'll do siege and ranged equally well. Ones that can do 3 or 4 troop types about equally well, they tend to suffer, and I wouldn't recommend more than just 2 specialty for each main general. Assistants, though, maybe there's a use case where we can plug and play an assistant into multiple roles without sacrificing efficiency. So, first let's look at how he will perform, Washington Prime that is, in the ground general slot. We're just going to be looking at the increased attack because, as you can see, all of these assistants are going to have pretty much 0 HP and defense across the board, except in the rare case where it's their specialty troop type. So that's not really a factor when comparing something like this. We're mainly just looking at the damage. With that said, ground troops definitely have a need for HP and defense, and the assistant gives a reasonable amount for a ground focused assistant. So that's definitely important to keep in mind, especially for the ground march. But when sorting by damage, we can see Genghis Khan comes in first, Alexander comes in second. Alexander is a dedicated ground general, so he does have the advantage here. And Washington Prime comes in third, just 2 billion behind Alexander. Now, as we said earlier, Genghis Khan can't take the march size book, and Alexander is a dedicated ground general, so this is about reasonable expectations. Once you factor in the march size book on Washington, depending on your specific level, troop march size, all of that, and the main general, I would say that in most cases we would expect to see him higher than Genghis Khan on this list. So we can safely say that Washington Prime is a decent ground assistant compared to these other ones. But let's see how he would stack up against actual ground assistants. Now, all of these calculators are calculated for the total damage. They're based on the K40 extra 2 billion buffed, and then the Tier 15 troop base attack. This one right here. Now, looking at the ground generals, Washington Prime had about 13 billion extra. That would put him about right here. So about the same place as Maida and Ludwig, about 6th or 7th place overall as a ground general, which is pretty respectable. Of course, he's not going to have the HP or defense that some of these guys are going to have, you're going to lose out on about 50 to 100, it looks like, depending on which one you would have chosen. So, not a terrible trade-off in considering the amount of resources you're going to save from investing in one. So he does have a use case as a ground assistant. Looking on to mounted assistant, obviously he is the best mounted assistant at the moment, so not even really a factor to consider there. Looking at the range generals, Genghis Khan comes up top, King Arthur second, Washington Prime in third. Once you factor in the March size book, you're probably going to see him jump above these two. No HP or defense for any of these guys, but of course, ranged troops, those are less important stats. Your attack is mostly what you're focused on. We're looking at about 14 billion from Washington Prime. Let's see what we would get from the other guys. Looks like he'd fall about at the same place as Agrippa, Simeon, and Godfrey. That's about 11th, 12th place overall for attack. So not great, but the difference between the billions of damage for ranged generals isn't as massive as it is for, like, say, mounted troops, so it's not a terribly large difference. Definitely he's not the best. He's about average as far as you would expect from a assistant range general, so it is a viable option. I wouldn't recommend it unless you're really wanting to save on resources, but you could put him in this position and see reasonably effective results. Looking at the siege generals, Napoleon normal comes out on top, which of course Napoleon is built as a kind of an all-rounder general, but he also does have an emphasis on siege, so not surprising to see him at the top here. Second, Genghis. Third, King Arthur. Fourth, Washington Prime. Once you throw in the book, he's probably going to perform as good as, if not better than, Napoleon normal in this situation. We're looking at 11 billion damage. Let's see how he stacks up against the other siege generals. Looks like he would fall in about this area right here with Septimus Servus and Zaka. So about average, middle of the pack. HP and defense for siege troops is important in some cases, especially if you're doing a siege v siege battle, so you are going to miss out on that. Overall, the assistant for sieges don't really have as high buffs as the ground generals did for overall, so it looks like you're going to be losing about an average of 30 to 50 in any category, depending on who you would have picked up from this list, but not a horrible choice to use him as an assistant for this march. So overall thoughts on it. As far as who would make the best all-arounder assistant, as far as I can tell, I think that Washington Prime fits the most roles and is the most efficient as an assistant due to the fact that he can just take that march size book. There might be others that would be better than him, but without running the stats for every single general, I kind of just have to guess and look at the stats and figure out which one I think would be best. These are the ones I think would be best. If you have a suggestion for another one, let me know. But to answer the question, yes, you can use Washington Prime as an assistant for any march, and it looks like you're going to get about average results across the board. So it is a viable option if you want to save on resources, just level him as your one assistant. It's definitely a viable strategy. I hope you all found this video useful, and I will catch y'all in the next one.